Oops, I skipped ahead there. Good morning. It's 10 a.m. on Tuesday, July 21st, 2020, and this is 10 on Tuesdays. For today's episode, I'm joined by special guest Nate Weber from the Wisconsin Department of Revenue. We're going to talk about a variety of topics today, kind of a update on what's going on at DOR. Nate works in the heart of the technical tax area at DOR. I'm Holly Hoffman, founding partner and CEO of the Sales and Income Tax Advisory Network. Prior to creating my company, I worked for the Wisconsin Department of Revenue as an auditor, speaker, and sales tax specialist. In fact, Nate was my boss. My passion is to help provide sales tax education and support to tax professionals, businesses, and associations with the goal of building a network of empowered taxpayers. For more information, visit salesandincometax.com. Thank you for joining my web chats, 10 on Tuesdays, every Tuesday from 10 to 10:30 a.m. You can check out previous episodes on my 10 on Tuesdays channel. To find my channel, go to salesandincometax.com and look for the 10 on Tuesdays logo. You can click the logo to register for the webinars or click on Watch Previous Episodes to access the 10 on Tuesdays channel. So now let me formally introduce my guest today, Nate Weber. Nate is the Director of the Office of Technical Services for Wisconsin Department of Revenue. He started at DOR in audit in the Appleton area and quickly worked his way up to his current position by being a technical tax law expert. Nate is the Director of the Office of Technical Services, which creates and manages the forms and publications for income, corp, pass-through, withholding, sales and use tax, and excise tax types, basically everything. In addition, his unit provides tax rulings, works closely with the Office of General Counsel and the DOR Secretary's Office, and often is involved in providing feedback on proposed legislation to ensure it can be administered effectively and that the language means what the legislators intended. Nate's unit implements new tax laws and provides internal and external training and resources. So Nate, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Holly. Thank you for the thorough introduction.
Did you want to share a little bit about what you do or anything about?
Well, you pretty much know a lot about me. You even included that I was your boss for a temporary period of time.
Those were rough days, right, Nate?
You were trained well, right?
Yeah, right.
I was a field auditor. I was one of the bad guys at the department for over 12 years, and I've been the director for over 7 years now. And you pretty much nailed the description of what we do in the Office of Technical Services. We have 20 different taxes and fees that we administer, including unclaimed property. We manage and update over 256 tax forms and instructions, many of which are annually with income tax. Over 135 publications and thousands of web pages of materials. So it's a hefty task. We also do the disclosure duties for the Department of Revenue and open records requests for the Division of IS&E. So pretty much anything that doesn't fit into a category in the department, such as processing a tax return or auditing, those projects usually fall on my staff.
Right. Yeah, you guys are busy.
So that's just a little bit about what we do. I try to reach out to practitioners. Annually, I do a speaking tour around the state, and that's kind of changed this year with COVID, the COVID-19 pandemic and social distancing. I think we'll be doing more webinars, and we haven't set the dates yet, but we'll be doing a series of Wisconsin Tax Update webinars this fall.
Yeah, it's kind of a mixed case with webinars. You can reach more people and it's easier for people to access the information. But on the other hand, it's so much better to see people face to face. So it's a tough one. So speaking of COVID, it seems like every 10 on Tuesday starts with COVID topics since it's like this pandemic is never going to end. And it has had a tremendous impact on businesses across Wisconsin. So I was going to start out by asking you if you could talk about some of the things DOR has done to provide tax relief or relief to businesses, some of the main programs.
Absolutely. It's been the hot topic and a lot of time spent on it this spring. Um, I think it initially started with the IRS that provided an extension of the income tax filing dates and payment dates as well. Uh, and how that messes, oh, it, um, is carried out through Wisconsin law is a little complicated, but in essence, we did follow the IRS notice to extend the income tax deadlines to July 15th, including the payment dates, because under our law, the interest does not apply during a federally declared disaster period, and that's what it was. It was presidentially declared disaster. So we put guidance out on our website to that effect, discussing the extended filing and payment deadlines for income tax. Our legislature also came back in after they had ended their session. They came back and passed Wisconsin Act 185, which allowed the Secretary of Revenue to provide relief from interest and penalties upon request for certain tax types. And the dates of relief were pretty much February and March returns for sales and withholding and excise tax could get extended, but only till May 11th, because that was all the governor could um, provide for an emergency, a state of emergency with 60 days. So that extension um, was for a short period of time, but it allowed waiver of interest and penalties. And then for other taxes and fees, it went an additional 30 days to June 10th. So you could, for example, the dry cleaning facilities have license fees that they pay quarterly, and those, the March or first quarter return could get extended until June 10th. But again, that was an application that we programmed, and it was a short window of time, and those extensions are no longer available because the period's beyond
Right.
the deadline. Other than that, the department put out some guidance regarding audit and collection relief. So we eased our collection activities during most of the period until July 15th, until recently. Um, but now things are kind of escalating with the um, increase of positive tests for COVID. So I'm not sure if we're going to extend audits or delay audits and collection activities further. Obviously, the state needs revenue. But I know our field auditors and field agents, collection agents, are doing whatever they can to facilitate audits and collection activities remotely and trying to limit face-to-face interaction and also enter into extension agreements if necessary to prevent face-to-face interaction and reviewing of business records. We also placed more staff on the homestead credit and earned income credit during the pandemic. As returns were getting filed, we wanted to ensure that people got their money as quickly as possible. So to the extent that staff weren't doing audit or collection activity, they were assigned to homestead and earned income credit.
Nice.
Yeah. And as far as Act 185, the legislature, they also adopted parts of the federal CARES Act, the Coronavirus Relief Act. And part of that was, for example, Wisconsin adopted the federal exclusion from income for forgivable payroll protection plan or PPP loans. So there'll be, if you're forgiven for those loans as a small business for federal purposes, you will also be for Wisconsin. And there's other items from the CARES Act that we adopted, for example, increased limitation on charitable donation deductions, waiver of penalties for early withdrawals from retirement plans. We do have a webpage article on our website that describes the provisions of the Federal CARES Act that we adopted for Wisconsin.
Yeah, and I have a slide of the COVID-19 resources right on the front page. It's a splash page on the homepage of DOR's website. And that's a great place to click into to get information, especially for any changing. I mean, who knows what's going to come out of federal legislation in the future, but it's a good place to go to check, right?
Absolutely. That should summarize most of our COVID resources on that link you provided.
Yeah.
And I
A
know,
couple, oh, go ahead.
no, we have had some questions coming in about employees that work remotely
Yes.
and whether there's any withholding relief. For example, an employee that works in one state but lives in another state, and is there any relief? And the only thing we've published is that there would be no relief, or we didn't publish it. We published that businesses would not incur a nexus in Wisconsin simply by having an employee teleworking from a home office in Wisconsin, and that's during the pandemic. But as far as withholding and individual income tax, the employee themselves are subject to income tax or withholding just as they normally would. So there's been no relief in the law from that aspect.
Yeah, that's been a tough adjustment for businesses to figure out what they need to do. Everything happened so quickly this spring, and the expectation was that this would all be like short term. And now it looks like it's, like you mentioned, it's ramping up again. So, do you know anything about? I know you don't do federal, but have you heard anything or any talk about the next CARES Act, the CARES Act Part 4 or whatever we're on now, um, and any initiatives that DOR is working on or changes that we might see in the future?
Well, I haven't kept up on the federal stuff as much as I probably should, but I do know that the congressman that has the Mobile Workforce Development or Mobile Workforce Act to provide relief for businesses that send their employees into a state for a certain number of days. That was reintroduced recently and added remote seller or remote worker provisions. And I believe the federal bill would allow 30 days of having an employee come into a state without incurring a income tax or a tax responsibility in that state. And during the pandemic, I believe it's 90 days. But obviously, if that passes for federal purposes, the states would have to follow it.
Right.
But as far as state only
Hmm.
legislative activity, right now our legislature's not in session. I haven't really got a good sense of what's going to happen, and they might not come back until after the election in the next session in January. But it will be potentially a budget repair bill if the budget isn't balanced. They might need to pass some laws to fix the deficit.
Right.
Otherwise, we are going into the next 2-year budget cycle of making proposals to the governor's office, and they're going to have to figure out the 2021 to 2023 budget bill. And I guess it really depends on what the revenue forecasts look like. If revenue forecasts are low, then there's going to be less tax breaks for citizens. So I guess there's a lot of unknowns at this point, and we haven't gotten clear direction on what the governor is looking for as far as tax provisions from the Department of Revenue.
I can't imagine if the legislature doesn't meet until after the election. Just, I don't know. I know you have kids. I have kids. A lot of the people on the call have kids, and just determining if school's going to happen is a hot mess right now. So it's just business future. It's really tough to try to plan and think and know what's going on, and it's crazy.
Yeah, another Another thing that we've implemented, because the Federal CARES Act provided, I believe it was around $2 billion to the state to help with costs, and a lot of it went to medical testing and supplies stuff. But the governor
Mhm.
put forth a farm support program that offered $50 million of relief to farmers, and that application deadline was in June, and we just sent checks to farmers that made between 35,000 and $5 million of gross farm income. We just sent payments to them on July 15th. And now there's still extra money available. So they want us to, the Department of Revenue, to implement round two. Why the Department of Agriculture is not implementing the program? Probably because DOR is good at sending out money. So we were able to program an online application in a short amount of time, and we were able to get the money out the door as quickly as possible. And now they want us to do round two with some extra money that's available. So we're lowering. There'll be nothing's official yet, but it's been communicated out in the media, and we'll be getting out communication soon when we get approval from the governor's office. But we believe round two will lower the threshold to $10,000 of gross farm income. So more people can apply for a farm support payment during this COVID pandemic. And we believe that application period is going to be a 2-week window between August 10th and August 24th. So if you have clients that are farmers and didn't make the cut in the first round, they can apply in the second round that should be coming up here shortly.
Nice. And there's been a lot of support programs and grant programs out there through economic development, corporations and things like that. And just connecting the businesses with that to make sure they're aware and apply on time is huge. So good to know that.
Yeah.
I do have some resources. One of them that we talked about was the COVID-19 resources, and I highly recommend people check that regularly for any updates because stuff happens quickly. Even though it seems like things don't happen quickly, it does, just like that farm program. And then we have the electronic mailing list. That's where DOR notifies you of changes or updates, depending on what mailing list you choose to enroll in. It could be sales tax, it could be corporate, could be cigarette and tobacco. There's a variety. Gosh, I think there's like 30 on that list of different mailing lists. And it's not, you don't get bombarded. So that's a really good one. The sales and use tax landing page looks really nice, right, Nate? And then definitely, I focus on sales and use tax, so I'm going to focus on sales and use tax. But customer service, if you have questions, you can call in, you can email in. If it's really technical, then it'll go to Nate's unit to answer. So this is DOR's homepage, the landing page, and right there, that COVID-19 coronavirus information that scrolls. So there's other updates, anything big and important that DOR is promoting is down there, but that's the easiest way to find that. What else, Nate? Did you want to point out anything on this
No, I
homepage?
think if you go back a slide, I
Yeah.
think your email, the customer service email address is DOR sales and
Oh,
use tax.
yeah. Yeah, right there.
Should
DOR
have
sales and
DOR at
use
the
tax.
front. Yep.
Oh, it's been a while, huh?
That's all right.
Okay. um, there's the business tax incentive finder. In online services, the little icons in the lower right-hand corner is the business tax incentive finder. That's very useful and something you should look at. And then the other thing I wanted to point out is the business's home landing page. It's where you can connect to all the tax types, but also in the lower right-hand corner, there's information for new businesses and getting registered and all that. And I disagree with DOR on some things now that I'm on this side. Not that I didn't disagree when I worked there, but I just really think that Wisconsin does a really good job overall versus other states. And I used to hear it all the time when I worked at DOR, but just looking at their resources online, it's really great. I know it's tough to find all of them, but if you contact customer service, you can get through and they can point you in the right direction. Anything you wanted to point out on that, Nate?
Nope. We, as time permits, I like to make our webpage more user friendly and intuitive. And again, as time permits, is a struggle sometimes.
Yeah, with all your publications and everything you have going on. And it's so much information, it is difficult to, how do you organize it? It depends on who's using it, of how they want to see it. And
Right.
this is the sales and use tax landing page. Everything sales and use tax here. They have articles that get updated under references, fact sheets, the guides and publications. Oh my goodness, you guys have publications for just about every industry that are really great and useful, that are good for people to look through, at least for a starting point or referencing back. The tax bulletins, those come out quarterly, sometimes more often if there's tax law changes.
Yep. And the July bulletin should be out by the end of July. So, and as you mentioned earlier, if you sign up for our email subscriber list, so if you, even if you went to our homepage and typed in a keyword search subscribe, you'll find the list of email subscriber lists. And I would suggest subscribe to the tax professionals one, because you'll get the broadest scope of news and information.
Yes. And the tax bulletin, even though it's listed here on sales and use tax, that is for all the tax types, the income corp. Excise has their own, the on tap for alcohol beverage. Maybe I'll ask you one last question. So you work with a lot of tax types. Maybe you'll get in trouble answering this at work. People pick on you. But what do you think, Nate, is your favorite tax type you like to work with?
Whew. I'm probably in the same boat as you as far as sales and use tax. Um, I like the idea that income tax is annual. um, Excise taxes aren't as broad, but sales and use tax seems, it's complicated enough, and it changes every day with new types of transactions, and trying to apply the law to an ever-changing business world makes it interesting and unique, and difficult at the same time. So I guess I'm up for that challenge. Um, I would choose sales tax is my favorite tax to research and respond to questions on.
Yeah, sales tax is fun. I don't think people realize, and out recruiting people, and to say fun and tax in the same sentence seems like an oxymoron, but it's interesting to say the least. And I was, just you think about things differently, and with this pandemic and technology changes and how people work differently, all that runs through my head is all the different ways of how is that transaction going to be taxed, or how does that fit into the law. And it's like suddenly we just shifted how we work and how we do things, how we do sales, how we communicate. And it's interesting. It'll be a huge, lots of work for you, Nate.
So I do have a couple things, if you don't mind me
Go
adding.
ahead.
Um,
Yes.
there was recently Supreme Court decisions that came out regarding a variety of topics, and one of them being some of the vetoes that the governor did in the last budget bill. One of them affected the Department of Revenue with regards to vapor products taxes. There was a partial veto of the definition, and it was ruled unconstitutional. Um, you'll be seeing guidance here shortly from the department um, going back um, and basically adopting a definition that was passed by the legislature. And what that means is that the vapor products tax um, does not apply to just liquids only. It applies to devices sold with liquids. The tax rate is on the milliliter, the volume of liquid or other substance that is used for vaping. But the way the definition was written is that it applied to the devices that contain the liquid or are sold with the liquid. So we know that there's vaping shops out there that or distributors that um, paid tax on just bulk containers of juice, what they call it, or the vaping liquid. And if tax was paid on that, they'll be able to apply or file amended returns and obtain the excise tax back on those items. And I know, Holly, that's near and dear to your heart because you helped me implement the guidance on that
Yes.
vapor products
What a
tax
mess.
legislation.
Well,
So
that's
that would,
good news for those people.
right. Yeah, and sometimes court decisions change the effect of tax. And this goes back to the date, the effective date of the law, so October 1st, 2019, which means that there will be a possibility for amended returns to be filed. Um, another thing I just want to let you know, we've been getting a lot of questions on unemployment insurance, and as part of the federal bill that was passed, there's an additional $600 of unemployment compensation that goes to individuals during this pandemic. And the federal government doesn't allow an exclusion from income, but Wisconsin does. You can take a subtraction against your federal income for a portion of your unemployment insurance, and it's a formula, and it's not easy to describe. But basically, there is a subtraction available, so it's not excluded from income. Federal taxes, unemployment insurance, and Wisconsin allows a subtraction on a portion of that. And we put out some new common questions on our website. Otherwise, the worksheet is in the Form 1 individual income tax return instructions. The other hot topic this year has been marketplaces. As you're well aware that January 1st, 2020, we finally got passed a bill that required marketplace providers to collect sales tax. And there's been a lot of questions from the sales tax side of things that we've been getting at the department. And we put out some more, we have a complete landing page on our website devoted to marketplace providers and sellers. And we've separated two different sets of common questions depending on what angle you're looking at it from. If you're a marketplace provider, you can go read those questions. If you're a marketplace seller that sells through a marketplace, you can go read those common questions. But we just recently added articles in our April Wisconsin Tax Bulletin and some new common questions on our website to describe examples of who are marketplaces.
I have a
And I know
question.
that
Oh, go ahead.
has increased dramatically during this pandemic. You'll see that sales tax revenues have declined from certain industries, such as restaurants. They were closed, but they've increased
Mm-hmm.
significantly for marketplaces. People are having their food delivered through these food delivery services, or having online shoppers shop for them at retail stores. One unique thing though, I wanted to point out to the audience, and I'm sorry I'm taking a little time here, is Our law as it stands right now provides that any increase in sales tax revenue as a result of marketplace bill that imposes the tax on marketplaces goes to reduce individual income taxes. And the 2020 individual income tax year will see a decline in individual income tax rates as a result of the increased sales tax from marketplaces. And it's going to be interesting to see in the next budget bill how that has an effect on the state's budget, since those sales tax revenues that we're seeing increase from marketplaces isn't going to balance the budget. But just a little interesting fact I thought I'd point out.
Speaking of Supreme Court decisions affecting things, the SEIU versus Voss decision, did that impact the new guidance documents law that you guys have to follow?
Yeah, actually, it directly impacted it. So certain provisions of Act 369 were ruled unconstitutional, and the guidance document provisions in part was ruled unconstitutional. That being said, the law no longer requires state agencies to submit guidance documents to the Legislative Reference Bureau for publication in the Administrative Register before they become an official guidance document. The Secretary doesn't need to certify and put a statement on the guidance documents, and the Department of Revenue is not required to put citations throughout their documents. So we haven't decided how we're going to proceed as an agency, and I believe the chief counsels of all the state agencies are meeting to discuss the outcome of that Supreme Court ruling. So it's always been our long-standing tradition that when we put out new guidance that affects an industry, for example, a publication on radio and television, we would reach out to the industry and ask them to review that publication before we publish it on our website. So it's been a long-standing tradition for the Department of Revenue to engage businesses and associations in reviewing some of our newer and bigger guidance, and I don't see that process changing. But I do see some of the guidance documents changing. If we don't have to put the Secretary's statement on there, that eliminates a big gray box on our publication. So we just don't know the effect of how we're going to proceed.
That's been a lot of work for you guys, as you had mentioned when we started out, the quantity of published guidance that you guys do. So that's huge. Do you have time for one more question?
Yep.
So the question is about, you are not part of audit, and you work with audit just tangentially as far as technical law goes. But can you describe to people how you work or how often you work in general? An overview of how you work with audit as technical services.
Yeah, well, at one point I thought the audit bureau was consuming a lot of my time, asking a lot of questions of me and my staff. And we started quantifying that a few years back by identifying who our customers are. And surprisingly enough, there's just as many questions coming to us from customer service bureau that forwards the more complex tax questions. The processing bureau needs assistance processing, answering processing questions. Even our attorneys and resolution officers ask us questions. So it's actually pretty evenly spread. But there is a process that if there's a technical tax question that an auditor doesn't know the answer to, they're supposed to research it and review it, discuss it with their supervisor, and have it reviewed kind of up the chain to the section chief and bureau director before it comes to technical services. And that process is because It's a learning process for everyone. And that expectation is on auditors to get familiar with the law and not just ask somebody else anytime they have a question. Does that answer your question, Holly?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Just an overview because people get confused. DOR is DOR as if you are all one unit and how you work together and how that flows up. And whether I work for DOR or now, I advise people if you don't understand, push back to the auditor and ask them to explain. And if you can't get an answer, then you push it to their supervisor and then it goes supervisor, lead worker, and then technical services. But it requires laying out the specific facts of your situation.
Yes. Yep.
Yep. Awesome. Well, our time is up and I don't want to take up any more of your time. I appreciate so much that you took time out of your schedule to talk with me today. We discussed a lot of different things, new things that I wasn't even aware of. Not that I know everything, I don't, but it was very interesting and helpful for me. So I know it was good for the audience. And we appreciate all the work that you do and your unit. And hello to everyone out there. You guys do a really great job in providing information and education to help businesses with compliance. And I know how difficult that is. So thank you. And I hope you come back and talk about new law changes or other news at DOR. So thank you, Nate.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us.
Next week, the topic will be sales tax audit tips. It's a replay from my April 21st episode because I'm going to be out of state. However, August is bringing new guests, so be sure to tune in. We have Senator Pat Teston August 4th live, and August 11th, we have Chris Schneider of the Wisconsin Auto and Truck Dealers Association. Chris is going to talk about industry updates for that area. And to rewatch this episode or to view previous episodes of 10 on Tuesdays, go to salesandincometax.com. Check out my 10 on Tuesdays channel. I hope you all listen in next week for important audit tips. And I will see all of you in 2 weeks for the live interview with Senator Pat Teston. Thank you.